All right, so this time we're diving into a story. It's both fascinating and kind of disheartening at the same time. The Stocks and Securities Limited scandal, the one that's been shaking up Jamaica. A lot of you wanted to know more, especially how this fraud went down and what's up with Usain Bolt's missing millions. Well, I've got all the latest reports and financial details right here, ready to go.
And this isn't just another, typical financial scandal. When someone like Usain Bolt gets caught up in this, it really makes you think about how vulnerable the system might be.
It's almost unbelievable, right? We're talking about 30 million US dollars gone, vanished. And it's affected at least 40 people so far, but one of those people is, Usain Bolt, the 8-time Olympic gold medalist. It's almost surreal. He claims there's like 12.7 million US dollars missing from his account.
Yeah, and the really crazy part is how much money seems to have disappeared.
Oh.
Bolt's lawyer is saying his account went from having $12.75 million to just 12,000. I mean, how does that even happen? How can this happen to anyone, let alone someone as famous as Bolt?
You would think with that kind of money, someone would notice. But get this, the former senior managers at SSL, they're saying they didn't know anything about any of this, like no wrongdoing at all. They're even saying they didn't even know Bolt had an account there. And to make it even weirder, they're saying that people who've been working there longer should have noticed this. Like these bigger accounts should have been flagged during audits.
And this is where it gets really interesting. See, if there were supposed to be extra checks on accounts with over $10 million, then either something went really wrong with those checks or somebody somewhere was looking the other way. Was this a complete system failure, or were people purposely ignoring what was happening?
Okay, this is where I got a little lost in all the research. Bolt's lawyer mentioned that the money wasn't actually directly under Bolt's name. It was held through an LLC. Can you maybe explain what that means?
Yeah, so an LLC is short for a limited liability company. It's like
Mhm.
a way for people, especially those with lots of money, to organize their investments. You can think of it like a separate entity, legally speaking,
Yeah.
that kind of protects their personal assets.
Yeah.
It can be good for taxes sometimes, but people can also use it to hide who really owns an account.
So, using an LLC in this case, was it like normal for SSL or a really bad sign?
That's a big question that investigators are going to be looking into for sure. LLCs are legal, but they can be used for bad stuff, especially in financial fraud cases. It's all about connecting the dots, seeing if this is just how SSL always did things, or if it was a piece of a much bigger scheme.
And get this, one source we found, they even questioned whether the $12.7 million ever actually even made it into the account. They were saying a transfer that big would leave a huge paper trail. If that trail doesn't exist, then, well, makes you wonder.
That is a really important point. If they can't find any record of that money going into SSL, it changes the whole story. It could mean we're looking at a fake account statement created to trick Bolt and maybe even other investors.
Wait, a fake fortune? How often does that actually happen?
More often than you might think, actually. Making up financial statements, it's a tactic, a way to trick people that's sometimes used in fraud cases. It makes things look legit, buys time for the people behind it, and it can even be hiding other fraudulent activity going on at the same time.
So it's like creating a distraction while they run off with bags of money.
Yeah, kind of like that. And trying to untangle that kind of deception can be a nightmare for investigators.
Okay, so we've got millions missing, possible problems with the audits, LLCs being used in a suspicious way, and now the chance that someone just made up a whole bunch of money. This is like something out of a movie. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's a real mess, and we're only just starting to see how deep this goes. Imagine you're trying to find millions of dollars, but even the documents saying the money existed might be fake.
It's like they're adding insult to injury. And Bolt, well, he's understandably upset, right? It's been almost a year since this all came out, and even though there's this big investigation going on, even the FBI is involved, nobody's heard much about any progress.
It's true, and that silence can be really tough on the victims in these situations. They're just stuck, waiting, not knowing if they'll ever get their money back. It really makes you question everything, not just the company involved, but like the whole financial system.
It made me think of something you said earlier about how this isn't just about numbers on a page. And Bolt's been really vocal on social media, expressing his frustration. He's even been using Jamaican sayings like time longer than rope. It really shows how deeply this is affecting him.
It does, and it reminds us that these scandals, they have a human cost. They impact real lives, livelihoods, even national pride, like we see with Bolt and how much he cares about Jamaica.
It makes you wonder about all the other people caught up in this, too. What about their stories?
Sadly, those stories often get lost in the shuffle, especially with someone as famous as Bolt involved. But every dollar that's gone, it represents a person or a family whose life has been turned upside down. We're talking about retirement savings that have vanished, dreams that have to be put on hold, the constant stress of not knowing how you're going to make ends meet.
It's a grim picture for sure. But Bull's not giving up. His holding company, they're suing SSL. And they're also suing a former client relationship manager, Jean Ann Panton. She's actually facing a bunch of charges related to the fraud.
Yeah, it's a complicated legal battle for sure. But it gets even more complex because the courts put everything on hold for now. They're waiting for a report from SSL's trustee.
Now, I'm not exactly a financial expert, but what exactly does a trustee do in this whole mess?
Basically, a trustee is like a neutral party appointed by the court to take charge of a company's affairs, especially when there's insolvency, which means they're broke, or when there's suspected fraud, like in this case. They have to go through all the financial records, see what's actually going on, figure what assets the company has left, and then try to distribute them fairly.
So everyone's just like waiting for this trustee to figure things out.
Exactly. It's a waiting game, and the stakes are incredibly high. Unraveling this whole thing, finding out who's responsible, figuring out if the missing money can even be recovered, it all comes down to what the trustee finds.
And SSL keeps saying they're working on those payouts to clients, but it's tough to feel optimistic when everything's still so unclear. Do you think we'll ever know the full story? Will Bolt and the other victims ever get their money back? That's the big question, isn't it? Or, well, the multi-million-dollar question, I guess. SSL says they're working on getting those payouts to people, but can they really do it? I mean, with all this fraud, is there even any money left?
That's a good question, and to be honest, we just don't know yet. Even if SSL wants to do the right thing, the money might just be gone. And then there's the question of who's going to be held responsible for all of this.
Exactly, because even if people get some money back, it doesn't make what happened okay. Will anyone else besides the person already facing charges actually have to answer for this? Will this whole thing force Jamaica to, make its financial laws tougher to protect everyone else?
Those are the really important questions, and they go way beyond just this one case. This
Yeah.
isn't just about Usain Bolt and his missing millions. It's about whether we can trust the systems that are supposed to be protecting our money. It's about making sure investors are safe. And it's about the real people whose lives are turned upside down when that trust is broken.
It's wild, right? We started with this crazy story about a famous athlete who lost a fortune, but it feels like we've stumbled onto something much bigger, something that's broken at a deeper level.
I think that's right. And sometimes the most important things we discover aren't the answers we find, but the questions that come up along the way. Questions that make us demand better, that make us really look at the systems we depend on, and that make us hold the people in charge accountable.
You've definitely given us a lot to think about today. What's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
That even when something seems as awful and hopeless as financial fraud, knowledge is power. If we understand how these schemes work, if we aren't afraid to ask the tough questions, and if we demand transparency, we can actually make a difference. Not just to protect ourselves, but to help build a financial system that's more resilient, more trustworthy for everyone.
I really like that. It feels like a good place to wrap up with a call to action, a reminder that even with something as complicated and messed up as this whole scandal, we all have a part to play.
Absolutely. Building a fairer and more just financial system is a marathon, not a sprint. And we all need to play our part, stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop paying attention.
Well said. To all our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Stay curious out there.